Okay, now I want to talk about annelids, which are the segmented worms. So they're in phylum Annelida. They are protostomes. Obviously, all the stuff we're talking about is protostomes or protozoa or radiata. So these are protostomes. They are complete coelomates, which means they have a complete body cavity, empty space filled with fluid, and then their gut tube is lined with mesoderm. Obviously, they're segmented. Annelid means little rings, like Lita, abuelita, like little grandma, timer of endearment. The Lita means little, so little rings, annelid. They have a closed circulatory system, so this is different than the other organisms we see. Besides the cephalopods, which are like your octopus and squid, nautilus, cuttlefish. So those have a closed one as well, but everything else has open or no circulatory system, just a gastrovascular cavity. So they also have a complete digestive system. They have an opening on both ends, so they'll have a mouth and an anus, which means that it's a one-way pathway instead of like our planarians, our flatworms, that have one way in and one way out, as well as the cnidarians and ctenophores. They have one way in and one way out as well. So that's not complete. So these guys are complete. They're called also a complete alimentary canal. That's the same thing as digestive system. There's two groups. You might have seen three groups on the poster, but really there's two groups, and that's how they discuss it in your book. The oligochaetes, or oligochaeta, and the polychaetes, or polychaeta. And so you can see here, this is an oligochaete or oligochaete. That's the earthworm. And then all these have more little projections on them we'll talk about in a minute. Those are all polychaetes. So those are the most common polychaeta of the annelids. Even though we mostly think about earthworms, they're actually mostly polychaeta. And then within oligochaeta, besides the earthworm group, there's also the leech group, of which these guys and these guys, I think all of these actually, maybe not this one, but these two are definitely leeches, which are Hirudinae, previously that class. Now they're under oligochaetes. Let's see. Okay, and this one, I guess, is the spaghetti worm, which is also part of the polychaete group. Okay, so here's your polychaetes, the most common annelids. They have many bristles. Chaete means bristle, and then poly means many. So you can see their projections. We call those projections parapodia, meaning like sort of feet. Podia, we know, means foot. Para means adjacent or beside. So these are beside feet, like sort of almost feet. They actually don't move, cause locomotion. Most of the time they're really adapted for respiration. So they have gas exchange across those parapodia. They're the fleshy parts. Then on the very end of the parapodia, that's where your CT are, or you could call them chaeta, this word. Those both mean the same thing, mean bristles. So those would be on the very ends of your parapodia. The polychaetes, we don't have a specimen that we used. There are, let's see, this is the clam worm, the Nereus, which is, if you see a polychaete, you probably have to identify it either by looking in here, maybe this one, or either of any of these guys. And you'll notice they have the parapodia. Or you'd get maybe a picture of this clam worm, this Nereus, and so that would tell you it's a polychaete, which is part of the annelids. We also have the oligochaetes, or they call them clitellata now, because they have clitella, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the clitellata include the traditional oligochaete group, meaning the earthworm group, and it includes the leech group, which they used to call Hirudinae, but now it's part of the, I like to say, clitella group, or clitellata group, because that way it's different than oligochaetes. And so these guys, you can still think of, there are definitely still two separate groups though. Okay, so let's talk about the earthworm group first. So the earthworm group, oligochaete means few bristles, chaetes again, oligo like oligarchy, few rulers. So these guys have a few bristles. We felt on the bottom of the earthworm, the preserved ones, we could actually feel little projections. Those are the CT, which are the bristles. These have an anterior posterior, a bilateral. So there's the anterior closer to this structure called the clitellum. It's like this, but UM at the end. So clitellum is this smooth patch on the oligochaete, particularly the earthworms always have that, and a number of the leeches have it as well. And so what goes on there is reproduction. There's mucus secretion, and sperm deposition, and then the from another earthworm, and then the mucus with the sperm in it travel down the body, pick up some eggs, and then they're fertilized, drop off the end into these little cocoons of little mucus, and then the earthworms develop there. So you can just say that this would be for reproductive purposes. Earthworms, all the Clitellata, these guys are going to be hermaphrodites. We'll look at the structures in a minute, but they do cross-fertilize. You can see the rings, the segmentation. We'll look at that inside in a minute. That's the Annelida. You can see they're bigger up here. And what else? Let's see. Moist habitats, because they do gas exchange across their skin. They don't have gills or lungs or anything like that. Okay, so if we look at their dissected specimen, the preserved one in the box, there's a number of things to notice. I will talk about those, and then I have our specimens here as well as the model. So I'm going to flip back and forth to show you the same part on all of them. Okay, so first thing is the mouth, and that's the entry into the digestive tract. So the mouth is going to be there, obviously, here and on this end here. So the clitellum is there, so you can tell anterior is closer to that. So that would be a food intake structure. Then we have the brain way up there too. So it's a little cluster of ganglion up there. Then it runs ventral nerve cord down the center of the organism on its ventral or belly side. Unlike us, we have it on our dorsal side in our spinal column or spinal cord. These guys, mostly all the protostomes have ventral nerve cords if they have a nerve cord. You can actually see the nerve cord here. And we do have it also here, as well as in our sections. So you can see the nerve cord there. And that's underneath the digestive tract. You can see the digestive tract was removed from that one. But there's the nice nerve cord. You can even see the projections coming off to the side. You can also see the separations of the segments. So that's going to be your, we call them septa, like your septum in your nose. So they're going to split the body into little segments. That's the segmentation of the worm. So these are all the septa. You can see that as well, oops, on the model. And their preserved specimen too. They're mostly removed here, but they would have been in between. We have, so that's the septa. CD we already talked about. We have the most prominent kind of structure you see first off is these white blobs, and those are all reproductive tissue. So there's both males and female parts, like I mentioned. The bigger ones are going to be the male parts. Those are called seminal vesicles. So here, that's number 7. They're kind of all over the place, actually. But there's also smaller ones. Those are seminal receptacles, which are the female producing, gamete producing parts. So these make sperm and these make your eggs. And we can see those on the model. So these are seminal vesicles. Those are our little seminal receptacles. It's external fertilization still, so they just release the eggs and sperm, and then we have there's the seminal vesicles. So I think of it as receptacles because typically the female receives the sperm, It's not, I mean, it's not internal, but that's how I remember it. And the male actually produces that and excretes it. Now both of them do that, or releases it. Both of them do that here, but little ones are female, the big ones are male. Vesicles, receptacles, vesicles. Okay, underneath those, kind of in between them, they're really sort of covered up. We see these structures here. Well, yeah, I'll just do this. These aortic arches, so we can see them in the black here, actually. They're the black arches. And I have a pretty good picture of them from your dissection. There we go. You can see them in this. So these are going to be your aortic arches. Those are going to be your hearts. So they pump the blood through the closed circulatory system. There is also your dorsal blood vessel. It runs the whole body, and that's going to carry the blood around the body to carry nutrients and oxygen and, well, I guess oxygen, not really, because that goes across the skin, but the nutrients definitely. And it'll carry it to all the parts of the body. So that's going to be those hearts, the aortic arches. There's 5 of them. Underneath the dorsal blood vessel, we have the digestive system. So we saw already the mouth and then the neural ganglion brain, and then we get to the parts of the digestive system. So the first part is the pharynx, then the esophagus, and that's going to go through the middle of here. Then we get to the parts I'm more concerned about, these two. We have first, this is a soft part, it's called the crop. So the C is before, the C's comes first in the alphabet. So the crop is first. You can see here, these are the reproductive structures. But the crop is first, that kind of stores and holds the food, softens it up a little bit. And then we have the gizzard, which is, if you poked it, it would be a harder structure. And that's going to be where the food's ground up. So if we go back here, here's the crop at number 8, and then the gizzard is at number 9. And they have bulbous parts on here. So the crop and the gizzard. Crop's first, gizzard second. They don't have, teeth either, so they have to grind it up in their gizzard. That's this word. Then we have the intestine that runs throughout the rest of the body. It's there. Would be all the way down from past the gizzard all the way down to the anus at the end. You can see it running underneath the dorsal blood vessel, and you can see it in yours as well. Zoom out. Now ours got broken up a little bit sometimes, but you can see it at the end here. The dirt is what's inside of it, so when you see that, that means that it got busted open a little bit, but really it runs all the way up here to the gizzard. And then the anus is the exit at the end. I also noticed we could see a nice ventral blood vessel because they have both in this dissection. So look at that. That's the ventral, the dark one, the ventral blood vessel, and that's the nerve cord, the light one underneath. And you could see that on our plastic model too. You'll see there's cords on both, or blood vessels on both sides. And there's the arches. Okay, so what else? Let's go back to our list. I think maybe that's everything. Oh, nephridia. So the only other thing I wanted to show, it's really hard to see in the real organism, but these blue, 2 little nephridia in each, or metanephridia, excuse me, metanephridia. So the metanephridia are the excretory system, so the metabolic waste, meaning nitrogenous waste, like our urine kind of waste. So the solid waste goes through the digestive tract. This is going to be for processing liquid waste. And you can see that they're coiled, actually look a lot like our kidney. They call them metanephridia in the annelids, in the earthworms. You can almost see them. They're in each segment. Let's close up to try to get them. Yeah, they're really, I can't find them, but they'd be in here. They're little coils. Every once in a while you can see them. Okay, so I think that's the earthworm. Then we come to the other class of oligochaetes. Those are, we're called the Hirudinia class. They have the word hirudin or something like that now as their group. But they are importantly secrete this molecule called hirudin. So you'd want to know how to spell that one, hirudin, which is that anticoagulant. So not all leeches do this, only the blood-sucking ones do. Most of them just are carnivores. The hirudin, though, by the blood-sucking ones, they basically secrete an anesthetic, which means it numbs you, and then they slash you open with their teeth and secrete the hirudin to keep your blood from clotting, and then they intake your blood. And so this would be the mouth. They have a sucker up there to hold on to the skin of the organism, and that's where they'd have the teeth that take in. You can see the pharynx, and then go down. Here's the digestive system, and that continues, and here would be the intestine. You're going to see it's branched. You see that frequently for exchange of materials. And then down here would be the anus, as well as a secondary sucker that's going to also help the leech stick onto the prey. I think that's everything about the leeches. And so that's basically your annelids. And here will be leeches. You can see the segmentation on those. I think I read that they don't have CD, but maybe that's just some of them, but don't worry about that. And here's some examples. Earthworm, leech, both actually in Oligochaeta or Clitellata, two different groups though, and here's the polychaetes. Okay. So that's basically your annelids.